The Indie Writers Club is brought to you by Publish Drive. With one click, self-publish your ebooks, audiobooks and print books to thousands of stores and libraries worldwide. And now you can start for free forever. Publish Drive's new free plan lets you publish your first ebook to 35 stores worldwide absolutely free. No subscription fees, no commissions. Keep 100% of the royalties. Get your titles online in just a few minutes at publishdrive.com.
It's the Indie Writers Club with Cara Clare and James Blatch. A place to relax, chat, learn and vent about life as an independent author. Get episode alerts and links at indiewritersclub.com. Now, here's Cara and James.
Hello, I am Cara Clare and James Blatch is back from holiday.
Blatch, yes, I'm back. I'm here, refreshed,
You're
ready
here.
to go.
I missed you.
You missed my birthday.
I'm sure I told you happy birthday, didn't I?
You did, yeah, but you weren't there.
Oh, well, I mean, I wasn't invited.
Look, I don't decide who goes in and out of Canada.
Did you have a lovely time?
I did have a lovely time and I did almost no work, but I did wake up early every day.
I caught you in a couple of our author groups, like asking a few work-related questions, and I was like, hang on a minute.
But I
You've
don't consider writing my books work. That's for me, that's like my hobby, and I got to do that whilst I was away. And look what I did. I sat down, I plotted my entire book, scene by scene.
Whoa.
I mean, you're watching on YouTube, you can see it's pages
How
and
many
pages.
pages?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full pages of
That's
A4.
like a proper outline.
Every scene is plotted. Well, not quite. I suppose it's not really every scene because it's about 30 odd, 35, 36 scenes. I suppose if you're 2,000 words a scene, that probably is every scene for me, actually. James Patterson and the kind of the modern thrillers, they're quite short chapters. They're 1,000-word chapters. But that's not really my style. I know I should be writing shorter chapters. I always take, anytime I read physical books now, I think is on vacation, on holiday.
Yeah, I love to take an actual book on holiday, which is ridiculous because that's the exact time that you should take a Kindle.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't weigh as much.
But I don't know, I suppose I think at some point on the plane, my Kindle might give up or something and I won't have anything to read. So I put a physical book in and I read it.
Nostalgic thing of going on holiday with like a stack of 6 books and then you kind of have to read those. You can't not read it and then read something else that's on your Kindle. You're like, nope, these are my holiday books that I am going to read. If I want something else, I'm going to have to try and exchange it with someone for something.
Yeah, that happens. I can remember the days before the Kindle having problems with weight in the bags. I mean, Jill, my wife, would read 4 or 5 novels easily on holiday. And so we'd limit ourselves because the bag would be so heavy because they'd weigh a lot. Anyway, I took a physical book, which I read, a different genre for me. It was about this vampire in Cambridge.
You read my book. Did you read it?
I read Luna by Cara Clare from
Did you actually read it?
I read it from cover to cover.
Thanks for choosing now to tell me. What did you think?
What did I think?
How was it?
I think Lucian has a very handsome cock. One of the things I learned about this, just to give you a little taste of what this book is about.
If you're watching on YouTube, James has the Kickstarter edition, which is really pretty and has like sprayed edges, but it also has naughty cartoons in it. So look away now if you don't want to see. Are you not going to read a bit?
I think the cartoons towards the back are not as naughty as the ones at the front. Is that right? I seem to remember.
I mean, I don't remember. I think they're all quite naughty, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, yes, they are. Yeah, as it turns out, I won't show them. It's a spicy romantasy, I guess, of vampire mafia. So I hadn't really clocked. You talked to me last year that you and a group of friends were going to write vampire mafia and try and make it a thing if you all sort of published at the same time. I hadn't really properly clocked that this book was that. But the first chapter as soon as you meet Lucian, who's the kind of the vampire MC, I thought this guy is a mafia boss. So it was very well written in terms of the meeting the mafia trope. It was very well written, can I just say? And I enjoyed it very much. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I was a little surprised it was such a kind of part 1 cliffhanger at the end, but let's talk to you about that. Let me ask you about that. So you get to the end of this book and it really is almost like the whole book is a setup for...
Yeah. I mean, my readers call me the queen of cliffhangers.
Yeah. So that's obviously deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of actually a trick that I learned from Britt Andrews. She's amazing at this. So she'll kind of wrap up almost the sort of subplot storyline of that one book and then almost kind of start the next one before, or she'll leave it on a dead like cliffhanger in the middle of a scene. So that's kind of what I did with my first series. And it works. You know, once the whole series is out on KU, it makes people just keep binging through. It was supposed to be a finished series sooner than now, but you know, life has got in the way. But yeah, it is an absolute like brutal cliffhanger, I think.
Well, it is, because you spend a lot of time talking about there being the main character is a human female who may have recently broken up and suffers from fibromyalgia. I mean, I can't imagine where you drew the influence for this. In fact, I knew this was a Cara Clare book because of you. In one of the opening scenes, she is sent in a box appendages of the dismembered person she was in a relationship with. I thought, if this is a divorce book, I'm reading a divorce book.
You know what? Like, I'm going to say something now, and this. I don't think my ex-husband ever listens to this, so hopefully it won't get me into trouble. When I wrote that scene, I may have used his name cathartically in order to write that scene.
Wasn't a surprise to me.
Just before I went to publish it, my sister went, I thought you were going to find and replace and like change the name. You might want to do that. I was like, oh shit. So she gets her ex-husband, her ex-partner is nasty piece of work, and the vampire mafia boss, this isn't going to spoil anything because it's literally the first chapter, to prove that he's going to always protect her, sends her a box with her ex-partner's various body parts in it.
Various body parts, including that one.
Including the one that you're all thinking about, yeah.
So
they
that was
say romance is dead.
You know, you listen to an album, you think, oh, this is such a breakup album. And I read that book thinking this is such a divorce book, and there's a lot of anger there.
It really is. I mean, the best part hasn't happened yet. He's gonna crop back up as Stephen.
No spoilers.
As a vampire later. Sorry. Yeah.
I didn't see that. I thought he was
There's
dead.
various body parts, but his heart isn't in there.
No, his heart isn't in there. Because they ate the heart of the Queen, didn't they? So I guess that's a thing where you have to make sure
and
she's not coming back.
There's some Easter eggs in there because it basically ties into the characters in my main series. So there are some bits that like readers who've read the main series will really enjoy, just like little references and stuff.
In the same universe as your main series.
It is, yeah. So me and the other authors who did this, I mean, there's some amazing authors in there like Sadie Kincaid and Kate Pickford, and some are writing in the same universe. So they created their own universe and they were all tying in their mafia families. So they were in charge of different territories. But because I wanted mine to link to my original series, I'm kind of taking part in the cross promotions and stuff. And I'm on the website as like an also thing, but mine isn't in their universe. But it's worked because if you look at Luna on Amazon, all of their books are coming up as the also boughts. It's the same with them. And we're all still, you know, releasing subsequent books. I mean, Sadie Kincaid, she got to Amazon Top 100, I think, with hers. Because she's got Bobby Kim kind of on her side with the TikTok stuff. But yeah, there's some big names doing it. And it was just because we were like, it was in Mallorca, actually. We started having the conversation at one of the masterminds where we went, why is nobody doing like vampire mafia? Because what's more mafia than a vampire? Like, and I'd already kind of had in my head that my characters were going to come to Cambridge for something. So that was perfect. Yeah. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. What did you think of The Spice? Did you actually read it or did you just skip past?
No, I read The Spice. I read all of it. What did I think of The Spice? I mean,
you used to watch porn for a living, so presumably
so
it was just sort of a similar thing.
There were a couple of things in there that reminded me of watching porn, things I don't like.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's things in there that I don't like because I put them in for readers and because of tropes. So when people read them and then they're like...
What the Japanese call fan service.
Yeah.
Where basically you put something in because that's what the fans require at that point. But I'm going to say spitting.
Yeah, I don't like it. I mean, there's a line, so there are things that I find really icky and horrible and I can't write them because kind of like some of the darker stuff, I actually find more, like, I don't like it. Like, I'm not yucking on anyone's yum, but I can't do that. But then there are some things that I just find a little bit gross, but I'll put it in because I know that people like it.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things.
I think for me, action and sex scenes are similar. I mean, they kind of do the same job in films and books, and they've got to be done well. So in your book, there was this, I mean, you talk about this, and I think you achieve it in the book, is that those scenes become part of the plot. They drive the plot forward, and they change things between the two characters. So from that point of view, they were integral to, which is why I didn't skip them, because they were integral to what was happening. But there's also a slight element with me, which are kind of like the Marvel films, where the action sequences are just bunged in there. They like, go on forever. And I can quite happily go on my phone, scroll during those 25 minutes of bish, bash, bosh scenes. And the sex scene in Top Gun, which didn't really serve any purpose. I could have scrolled through that.
About that. You hated that, didn't you?
So I don't know if the sex scenes really written for me in mind, but I think what you do there is they are.
Yeah, I didn't write them with you in mind.
Yeah, I didn't really mean it quite like that. But in either way.
Moving on.
But, I mean, I'm just kind of reading them, learning about sex.
Learning,
I know most of that, but learning about what these books deliver, what they offer, what they are. And it occurs to me that you probably pre-indie, you just wouldn't have got that. Pre-indie, you would have got, I mean, you could have bought those books that Alistair Campbell used to write, the Politico in the UK used to write these dirty stories in Forum magazine.
Yeah.
Which I can remember in those men's magazines when you're a teenager and you know, somebody gets one off the top shelf for you. They had a letters page on there, which is basically, I've got to tell you about the time the plumber came in, and it's graphic descriptions of sex. And that's where a Forum magazine had just that. It was just, you know, a couple of pictures, but mainly the stories. But that was it, right? Because all the other romance would have been very perfunctory.
Yeah, I mean, Mills and Boon, there was some steamy stuff, and like, you know,
but not this.
Ginny Cooper, but not this. No, there was. No. I remember when I was at uni, there was various blogs and things where, kind of similar to what you were saying about the magazines, it would be, you know, random people just writing kind of fantasies, I guess, and stories, but nothing like this. And I guess 50 Shades probably was the thing that really kicked that off and changed it.
Made it kind of mainstream.
Yeah, changed the landscape. The fun thing for me with the mafia thing was taking the normal mafia tropes and then just making them vampire. So a really key trope in mafia is the mafia boss tattooing the FMC's name on his body somewhere. And I was like, how can I take that and make it like vampire? So he cuts his chest open and carves her name into his ribs, which actually, I don't know if you can see it on YouTube. There's a bone there that says Luna on it, which I got to celebrate the hanging on my wall. There's a bone with Luna carved into it. Can you not? Behind the lamp.
Behind the lamp, there just looks on YouTube, or what I'm looking at, maybe on the clearer picture that YouTube gets than I get.
Okay.
It's all muffled. But anyway, yes. Okay. So, yes, I mean, that was quite a graphic scene as well, sort of violent, icky scene. It is quite icky,
they do
the book
have
as
like,
well.
Yeah, they're kind of, if you think like True Blood, the TV show, levels of gore, they also do have quite a lot of, you know, fun murder and action stuff going on.
Well, so that was the book I read. On top of
I'm glad that the review wasn't. I ditched it in Canada and left it there.
No, I enjoyed it very much, and it's not a long book. I guess that's another trope of these books. Is it's how many words is that?
It really varies, actually. I tend to write about 50k, and that's more. I probably should write longer because for KU it's better to write longer, but I just can't. I don't like it. My style of writing is 50 to 55k is about my optimum. Like, that's what I like to write. I'd rather write a longer series with shorter books in it and stick, because I like the fast pace, the momentum and things. So, you know, when we were talking about reviews, some people say that it's too quick. There's not enough world building, but that's my style. Like, that's just something that I've accepted about myself. That's how I like to write and that's how I like to read. So
yeah.
That's just
personally, I think I like that. I mean, world building sounds like a really boring part of a book to me. I'm doing a world building chapter. What's that mean? Just describing the scenery.
Yeah,
I'd rather have the world in my head.
Yeah, and I think that's for me. Like, when I read, I can take a small detail and then that kind of spirals in my head. So I don't need like chapters and chapters. So that's just how I like to write.
And to get intellectual about it, that's how art works. It works because you complete it in your head.
Yeah, there you go. So actually, we should all be writing short books.
Yes, we should.
But anyway, back to your outline. So you said something to me before, which ties into what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, I tell you what, before we get onto that, I want to talk about the retreat.
Okay, yes.
Because we're going to really
We haven't talked about this yet.
No, we haven't talked about it. We're going to release tickets next week. So I'm going to release tickets on Tuesday. So this goes out on Friday. So Tuesday, the date on Tuesday is, and all the calendar nearby, 18th. So Tuesday the 18th at, we'll do it in the afternoon because I know there's Americans as well. We might be oversubscribed. It certainly looks like it from the waitlist point of view, but you never really know. I'm going to give you all the details in a moment about how much it's going to cost and what you get for that at, we'll say 4 p.m. UK, which is just about morning time in the US. 4 p.m. UK on Tuesday, the 18th of February, we will open the box office for the retreat. So you'll get an email. If you're on the wait list, you'll get an email with the link around that time. So we've only got 20 spots on it, and this is what it's going to be. So first of all, the price. I'll start with that. So it's £599 plus VAT. So we have to charge VAT in the UK. So that's another 20% on top of that. Now, if you're in the UK, you can claim that extra back. So that's another £218. No, that's £118. So it's £718.80 is the VAT price. And you can claim the VAT element back if you're in the UK and you're VAT registered. If you're not, I'm not really sure how that works, but unfortunately, it's really annoying that we can't. Until last year, education events were exempt from VAT, but they're not anymore. So what do you get for that? Well, it's June the 27th, 28th and 29th. So you get 3 nights accommodation in a stunning surroundings of a historic Tudor mansion near Cambridge. So they are single rooms. They're designed for student accommodations. You get a writing desk in there. And that's useful because you might want to write in your room, but there are lots of lovely surroundings in the entire grounds, and we visited them personally, haven't we, Cara?
We did, yeah. And I mean, we went when it was kind of grey and mizzly and it was still stunning. So thinking about what it's going to look like in the summer, it's just going to be absolutely beautiful.
It is going to be beautiful. So there'll be dinner on night 1, the 27th. Night 2, we're going to arrange transport into Cambridge, and in Cambridge, Mark Wells is going to give those of you who would like it a tour of historic Cambridge University with a few ghost stories thrown in. At some point during that day as well, I will offer a smaller tour for anyone who wants it to Madingley Military Cemetery, which is one of the 2 big cemeteries in the UK for American servicemen from the Second World War. It's a really beautiful place to visit, very tranquil, very peaceful place of respect. And if you're American in particular, I think you'll find it very moving. And it's just on the, it's just like 2 miles away from where we're staying as well. So we'll do that on the 28th. So dinner on the 28th isn't included. The dinner on the 28th will be a free-for-all in Cambridge. Loads of wonderful restaurants in Cambridge. So you'll have your choice. But you and I, Cara, let's say that we'll organise a dinner. We'll tell you which restaurant we're in and we'll book a table. And if you want to join us, you'll be absolutely welcome to do that. But that will be a little bit extra. 29th dinner is included. So that's the 3rd night. And so you get 3 nights, 2 dinners. We're not going to do lunch because we think breakfast is included, I should say. So there's breakfast every day. We just think not everyone eats like 3 meals a day, and, it'd be a waste of our money, probably a waste of your money having to add that onto the price to do lunch as well. There is a cafe, there is a bar. So if you want to pick up a sandwich, and you can do that very reasonably in the hotel itself. Extensive grounds, walled garden, plenty of benches, tables and chairs. Each day will start in the Stewart Room, which is an oak-panelled library. It's a beautiful room. We'll begin with a mini presentation on a topic useful for indie writers. This will be followed by free writing sessions. You can wander into the grounds if you wish, or stay in the Stewart Room and join others in organised writing sprints. Lunch, as I say, is self-service, and there's a cafe on site. After lunch, we'll lead a discussion on a topic before the afternoon writing sessions. And then on the first and last evenings, we'll have some form of entertainment. Probably going to do a quiz and make use of the bar. In the middle of the night, as I say, transport into Cambridge, a walking tour of Cambridge University, and you can join us for dinner or go and book your own dinners in Cambridge. So 3 nights, bed and breakfast, 2 dinners, writing retreat, bit of learning, bit of entertainment. It's going to cost you £599 plus VAT. I really wish I didn't have to say that at the end of this. Plus VAT, which makes the total £718.80. We have a huge whopping 20% VAT in the UK. And I've been really puzzling it over the last few weeks of a way around it, but there isn't a legal one anyway.
We've tried, haven't we? We've tried to come up with so many different ways around it, but there just isn't one. But if you're VAT registered in the UK, you can claim it back, can't you?
Yeah, if you're VAT registered, you won't end up paying that. You'll end up getting that back from the VAT man. But if you're coming over from the States, you basically got to stay somewhere in the UK for those 3 nights if you're staying. So it works out as £239 a night, including the VAT. Cheaper than that if you're in the UK and VAT registered. So I think it's as reasonable as we can get it to make sure that we can cover the cost and it's going to happen and make it worthwhile. That's the lowdown. There are 20 places. They go on sale, as I say, on Tuesday the 18th. You'll get an email during the day to give you the link, and we'll open the page at 4 p.m. UK. So if you want to join us, that's where to be. It's not too late to get on the wait list so that you get that link, and you can do that today if you go to indiewritersclub.com/retreat. It'll be the first ever one. I'm really looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. And I keep reminding myself that it's going to be in June, like the weather's going to be, or late June, the weather's going to be great. The sun will be out till late in the evening, and there's so many little spots that you can go and write outside. That library room as well was just, when we went in there, we were like, yeah, this is the room, because it's just perfect. There's also a piano. So if anyone plays piano and wants to, serenade us in the evening.
Forgotten about the piano.
Yeah.
You play piano?
Very badly. Not well enough to play for anyone else, I'm afraid. Moving swiftly on.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll find out when you had a few drink glasses and she goes towards the piano. Don't make me play.
No, I couldn't possibly.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, okay, so one of the things I did whilst on holiday is I've been backwards and forwards on my novel, as everyone knows. I sort of write out loud and I explain what I'm doing the whole time, which is, I know some people like that. Hopefully no one gets bored of me talking about the long, torturous process I have for writing a novel, but
I think that's just like James Blatt's brand, isn't it?
Yeah,
we've all been involved from the very start of your writing journey.
All full ownership. So I sell at least 200 books at the beginning because people think I've got to read this as a marketing tactic.
Clever marketing.
So the thing is, I got the first third done. I knew roughly where it was going to end, but I hadn't really worked out the middle. So I thought, okay, on my holiday, the only thing I was going to do work-wise is this, because I consider it work. And I decided to use AI properly. So Elizabeth Ann West style properly, who teaches how to not just type in a prompt saying, oh, help me with this scene, but talk backwards and forward, give everything that you've done so far, say where you'd like it to go, and help me plot it. And basically, you are still plotting. You're still coming up with what's happening. But what I got AI to do is to break down how that would work in terms of scenes. And by giving it small chunks to work on and putting them together, I ended up with, I think, 6 pages here, show if you're watching on YouTube, of AI, of numbered scenes. You can see my ticks, actually, where I've been starting to rewrite them.
You've been making notes and everything.
And this is it now. So this is a fairly detailed plot of the novel, which I'm much happier with writing, even if I am going to deviate, which would be, I will let you know if that starts happening, or whether I stick to this. It's 35 odd chapters, I think, looking at it, which is, 2,000 words chapter is going to be about right for me. Although I am aware that the kind of modern thrillers, the James Patterson, Harlan Coben type books, are much shorter chapters these days with a hook at the end of, I think sometimes a rather clumsy hook at the end of the last sentence. I'm not going to do that, even though that is kind of the big selling way of writing your books. It's just not me at the moment. I can't write in that style. So I will probably be 2,000 word chapters, more likely.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where you've got to accept if that's your writing style and that's what you're comfortable with, and and you do it well. If you still write a good 2,000 word chapter, you force yourself to write shorter just because that's what other people say that you should be doing. Yeah.
So writing well, we're going to talk about AI today in this episode because there has been, and I'm going to talk about Jane Friedman in a minute and give a big plug to her newsletter because she's put together a kind of synopsis of the latest legal position. And we did some of this a while back, but there's been a new interim kind of ruling in the States, which is relevant to us. But just before that, I do want to talk about writing style because there was an interesting conversation on another podcast. There's a podcast in the UK called The Rest is Entertainment by Richard Osman, who's a very big selling cozy mystery writer now, was known as a kind of TV personality and TV producer before that. And Marina Hyde is a Guardian news journalist. And they were talking about the new Dan Brown book. And Dan Brown, for me, is like the litmus test of, do you understand what publishing's about? And the people who roll their eyes and say, oh my God, written for children, even though those people very often seem to work in traditional publishing. And complain that they can't wait for the new book that everyone's talking about, A Gentleman in Moscow or whatever. And they all read that and devour it. And then they go back to their slavish work where they have to put out this tawdry stuff, in some cases Dan Brown, and what it never seems to connect the dots. So that's what people read and like in their millions, and actually not that many people read those big Booker prizes. So publishing is about the mass market. Publishing is about, so if you roll your eyes at Dan Brown, but they trod very lightly through this, both hugely admirable, in admiration for Dan Brown and for what he does, whilst acknowledging that the writing, I mean, Marina said, is not very good, what she said, which I don't agree with, because I don't think it's so subjective to say that anyway, what is good and bad writing. But it got me thinking about kind of conversations we've had before, which is that the basic two elements to a novel, right? There's characters and there's story. And we've made this point before, but it's always worth reiterating that the perfect novel has character development driven by the story. So everything's intertwined. If something happens, an action scene, we talked about sex scenes earlier and action scenes, everything's intertwined. And do I say that word right?
Intertwined. You're missing
intertwined.
a term.
Why?
I nearly went into mum mode then and actually corrected your pronunciation, and I stopped myself.
I could hear myself saying it, intertwined, because I think there's only one T and there's two T's. Or does one T do the job at the beginning and the end of that word?
No, there's two T's.
Intertwined.
Intertwined, yeah.
Intertwined. So if you do that perfectly, but if your story is absolutely amazing, you don't need character development. Honestly, that's the truth of it. And that's the case with Robert Langdon, who's the main character of Dan Brown's books. I couldn't tell you anything about him. Yeah, but there's no character development, but the story is absolutely compelling. Conversely, funny enough, I mentioned The Gentleman in Moscow, which is a novel everyone read recently, and I read that. And that's kind of the opposite, where there's almost no story, but it's all character. So if you've got this incredible character development, really gripping character, you just want to know what he's thinking, what he's doing, you can get away with it. For most of us, it's somewhere in between those two. You know, you need a bit of both. The bit that doesn't matter is how well written it is. Honestly, I honestly believe this. It does not matter. The only time it matters to me is when a clumsy writer who's writing genre fiction thinks they're Martin Amis or thinks they're Sebastian Faulks, and they overwrite their book trying to be clever to themselves.
Too much purple prose is like, no. And also if it's very slapdash in terms of editing or grammar, you know, but even then there's people will accept an awful lot if the characters and the plot are good. I mean, an example that I always think of is the crime author Angela Marsons, and I believe she started as self-published. I could be wrong, but she's now with Bookouture. Absolutely hugely successful crime author. Like, her series is just phenomenally successful, and a lot of people say, but they're written so badly. And but the characters are incredible. And who's defining badly? What's the purpose of literature? I mean, it goes on to this whole bigger debate, doesn't it? Like quite a philosophical debate. What is the purpose of literature? If its purpose is to entertain and she is entertaining, then why is it bad? How can it possibly be written badly if it's doing its job and entertaining people? So it really, it winds me up and it gets my goat. And I think it ties into people's opinion. The way people talk about Dan Brown is similar to the way people talk about self-published authors. Like, oh, well, you know, it's rubbish, isn't it? Because a gatekeeper at a publishing house who has, for some reason, ended up in that position. And traditionally, people who worked in traditional publishing, a lot of the time, there was a phrase for it, and I can't remember what it was, but it basically implied that it was people who were married to people who had very wealthy partners, because publishing was so poorly paid that you could only really work in it if it was a total passion and you sort of didn't necessarily have any qualifications. So it's who's deciding, who's making that decision about good or bad.
So Dan Brown has a new book coming out, by the way, is the prompt for this. It's coming out later this year, which is going to be huge, no doubt. Yeah, and I think there are books. I mean, I mentioned Martin Amis, so, you know, I've only read one of his novels and I enjoyed it. It's Money, which is perhaps his most famous novel. I enjoyed it, but I kind of do wade through it, and it's not for me. I understand for other people, perhaps people who also read poetry, because that's what that is really. That's what that kind of prose is giving you. I understand for them, that's it. That's what they're getting. So we talk about character and story, but there's that extra element. But I think that's pretty rare. And I think those people only seem to exist on podcasts and publishing. Not sure they really exist in real life very often. You know, I mentioned Sebastian Faulks. Ian McEwan's my favourite writer, and he probably does write. But I don't notice if he writes beautiful prose because he makes it look so effortless. And he is, for me, he's God in writing. He's right up there, and I can't aspire to be anything like him. He probably does write nice prose and use good words, but like I say, it's effortless. So the worst thing that happens is that people get that stuff in the way of the stories and the characters which you're there for. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because I'm now rewriting this book from the beginning, tinkering, and it's kind of messed with my head a little bit, this discussion that there's people out there. And I think a little bit because I'm quite insecure about those sort of things. And I'm a people pleaser in life. And there's a part of me now thinking I want Marina and Richard to be slightly pleased with it, like they're ever going to read it. But those type of people would be slightly pleased with the words I've used. And that's such a stupid thing. I need to get that away from me, go back to just telling the story and developing the characters in the way that I want, and not worry about the dewy mist. Oh, no, I can't even make up adjectives now. But
it's not stupid because we all, why are Marina and Richard's opinions worth any more than your readers' opinions? They're not really. It's just because they're positioned as celebrities who, Richard Osman is successful in what he does, but there's an argument for, well, were his books successful because he was already a TV personality? But we all do this thing where we put people on a pedestal and then we make ourselves think that their opinion is worth more than someone else's. But if your readers are enjoying your book and you're providing value to them, then who cares?
I mean, I should say, first of all, I think Richard Osman must be a brilliant writer. There's no, however much of he was only, he was a quiz show host. That did not give him the platform for the millions of books he sold around the world.
Yeah, and I haven't read them, so I don't know.
The only thing I think he got probably was a film. He did say this in the podcast, actually, that they did the film deal before the book was released. So really? I suspect his contacts enabled him and they thought, well, he's got a big enough platform, but the rest of it is down to him. And I'll also say that I really enjoy Marina Hyde and Richard Osman talking. And I think they did a really good discussion about Dan Brown and why he's so successful. And it was quite respectful for Dan Brown, which is not the usual thing. It was just them having to talk around and mention the kind of elephant in the room, which is writing's not very good. And I just thought that kind of was interesting to me.
Yeah, and I also think it's just so subjective. I mean, it's interesting, actually, they're talking about characters and story, because I'm rereading a book that I've read before, which is called The Passage by Justin Cronin, which is like a post-apocalyptic vampire thing. But this book is huge. It's like over 1,000 pages. And I remember when it came out, the publishers decided it was going to be a success, and they actually released the first part of the book, because it's such a huge book, as broadsheet newspaper style in bookshops, and they were just giving it away for free because there's so much more of the book to read after that first huge chunk. And I mentioned to Sasha Black that I was reading it, and she went, "Oh my God, really?" And I've read this book 5 times. It's one of my favorite books. And she was like, she couldn't stand it. She was like, how? Huh. In Clifton Strength Speak, we're both high activator, which is like fast paced. She was like, how can you be reading that if you're high activator? Like nothing happens. It's 1,000 pages of nothing happening. And for me, I think it's the characters, because the chapters are quite short and there's many, many characters, and the way he captures the characters, for me, I find it fascinating. I absolutely love it, but she hates it. And it's just such, like, we have to remind ourselves of that. And I think it ties into what we were saying about reviews. It's like, choose your favorite book and then look at its bad reviews. It's so subjective. So that's why I don't like it when people say things like a bad writer or a good writer. I love having an actual debate about it and being like, but why did you hate it? And getting kind of into it in that way, but not in that dismissive sort of, well, he's just Dan Brown.
Yes.
Not that I think Dan Brown gives the monkeys, because he's probably, consoling himself with his
He's still trying to work out what to do with all his money. Yes.
Yeah.
Good for him. I love Da Vinci Code, by the way. Absolutely devoured it.
Yeah.
And there's something I think, if you want to write novels that people want to read, then you read that novel and try to work out how it's written.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, though, who is a bad writer is Claude and ChatGPT.
Yes. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Bringing us back to AI, you said about chapter hooks. If you use it in the way of just saying, write me a chapter, and I think this is what people who are staunch against AI and haven't ever played around with it because they're so anti-AI, so they haven't gone in there and tried it. There's no way that you could use that if you actually wanted the book to be good as just your content and not do anything with it. I mean, every time they try to end a chapter, it ends on something like, and little did they know, something terrible was about to happen.
Yes.
And their chapters are about, 500 words or something. They can't write a 2,000 word chapters. But we were going to talk about Jane Friedman's.
Yes. What I discovered working a bit more closely, more intelligently with AI, excuse the pun, on my holiday in the morning, is that the more you give it, the more useful it is, and the less you give it, the less use it is. So for most people, I would say probably 90% of people's interaction with AI is not giving it enough information, is like just perfunctory. Oh, by the way, you described sex with your ex, not your ex, but the main character, the FMC's ex, as perfunctory in the book. And I described disappointing sex by my main character's ex as perfunctory in my first novel. So we both use the same word about sex. Yes. So, but I worked much closer with it, really going backwards and forwards along it to the point where you're getting those warnings saying this thread is too long. It might be quicker because apparently it takes the whole thread into account every time it answers a new question.
It does. Yeah. And if you upload documents as well, it uses up your usage limits quicker. Yeah. Because I'm the same as you, actually. Funny enough, while you were away, because I had a bit more time on my hands because you weren't.
I take up a lot of your time. Is that what you're saying?
No, I started outlining the next novel that I'm going to write, which is going to be a standalone romantasy one. And I was working really closely with AI because it's quite. I needed to do more world building than I normally would, and I struggle to keep all that stuff in my head. I really struggle, and I struggle to write it down and find a sensible way of even writing it down and keeping track of it. So I did a huge, brain dump of everything that was in my head. I had certain scenes that were really, really vivid in my head and certain things that I knew needed to happen. But it's also going to be a dual timeline thing, a bit like Sliding Doors, where there's one event and then we see two different versions of what. So I was trying to figure out how to tie that in and how to weave it all together. And it was, I was doing the same thing as you, really, this really close back and forth. And it's hard to explain if you haven't ever used it in that way, exactly what it's like.
It's much better, right? You get a much better, useful set of results from it that way.
And you're almost using it to order your own thoughts and to help you, kind of like having a writing partner, except it doesn't have its own opinions. So if you're co-writing with somebody, they will have their own opinions, so they will disagree with you. AI is not going to disagree with you because it doesn't have an opinion. It's not a person.
Well, it does have an opinion. It always thinks everything's great.
Yeah, it will always congratulate you on every idea that you have. Even if it's shocking, it will go, that was a fantastic idea.
I guess it's a bit like having a reader in front of you when you're thinking about the plot and you say, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? And the reader says, oh, that's a good idea. Why don't you break it down into these scenes? And then that's the bit that AI is doing for you, is to, I asked it to come up with these scenes and flesh out what's going to happen in each scene. You can sort of see below if you're watching on YouTube. There's a title of a scene and then 5 or 6 points underneath it. And I asked AI to make sure that there was stuff in there to remind me of what the character arc was at that point and what they were learning. So that's the sort of thing that's going to be useful that I could have done by hand.
Yeah.
And maybe some people love doing that by hand, but I actually enjoyed that process, and it seems to be
and I think for me it's like a shortcut for my own brain. So it's because it's got the whole conversation thread, it would take me ages to look back through it and to check everything that we've plotted out so far and that I've figured out, and to make sure that something makes sense. Whereas if I go, would it work if this particular thing had happened in her past in relation to what we decided the mythology was about the goddess that lives on the island? It knows all that because it's got it all there in the thread and it can answer you instantly. Whereas for me, that would probably take about an hour of going through all that information and finding it. So it's more using it to kind of shortcut and rewire your own brain and your own thoughts is the way that I'm using it. And I really enjoyed it. I've got like 10,000 words of world building stuff, which never happens for me. Never, because I don't know if it's the ADHD thing, but I can't stick with it long enough. I get overwhelmed and I go, no, I can't. And so I end up not doing that and just getting on with it and just writing it. And then I have plot holes to figure out later on because there's things that I haven't taken into consideration. So I really, really enjoy working in that way. Like, it's been really fun.
I do. But there are legal question marks hanging over this. And particularly if you're then using it to generate the words, which I suspect at some point.
For the actual writing.
I've done this once just to try out a scene I suspect I will do it again. I will use AI and look at this scene or write the scene for me and tell me what you think. And then I'll go back over that and maybe change half of it or whatever. So this all introduces an end result that has AI fingerprints on it, to some degree content generated by AI, but certainly plot. And to that end, we're going to talk about where we are in the legal position this week, because Jane Friedman, I give a big plug for Jane. So Jane, who I interviewed in the past on our previous podcast, if you go to janefriedman.com, she has a hot sheet, it's called, which is an email that you get weekly. In fact, she's changing how it's going to work. I think it was 2 weekly. So it's going to be weekly in the future. She made a few announcements this week about some tweaks to it. It's a paid service, but it's very cheap, like $50 a year, something like that. And it's everything that's going on in the industry. And she could easily have been a very traditional publishing person, because that's where she comes from. Mm-hmm. And she could easily have been a little word about indie, but Jane loves indie and she completely gets it and completely understands how it's transforming the publishing world. So she, reading her emails over the years, has been the history of how publishing is changing. I love it. I love it just to keep, on track with the industry. But I'm going to big plug to her because shamelessly going to read through some of the things she's put together on this latest ruling. So basically, it's part 2 of the government. This is the US government's report on copyright and artificial intelligence. It's released last month. And this is addressing whether people can claim copyright of materials they create using generative AI. So ChatGPT, Claude, and Pseudo-Write, etc. So there's a few references at the beginning of here, but this is some actual direct quotes from the report that I want to start off with. So these are recommendations from the report. Questions and copyrightability, didn't know that was a word, and AI can be resolved pursuant to existing law, so without the need for legislative change. What they're basically saying is that the United States Copyright Office believes that existing copyright law remains adequate in a world with AI use, which is interesting. So whether human contributions to AI-generated outputs are sufficient to constitute authorship must be analysed on a case-by-case basis, which is a rather boring answer. And it
feels to me like a little bit of a cop-out. Like, we're not actually going to come up with a rule. It's going to be case-by-case, and you kind of have to decide what you think yourself.
Well, that is exactly where we're going to be with this. And the comparison they're using is fair use. So fair use is a defense of using copyrighted material. So if you're doing a review and you show a clip of a film, even without permission, you can argue fair use because it was illustrating an honest review. And that would stand up in court. So, you'd be a bit, probably, without taking legal advice, I wouldn't suggest you do that, but you can use fair use as other. But fair use is then decided in court, and they say, well, was this fair use? Was it an honest, were you being paid, or were you trying to do something like disparage the film, etc. So fair use is done case by case, and that's where they say this is going to go as well. The thing is that most of us don't really get involved in fair use. So I suppose actually people who've ended up taking images off the internet and using them in their emails without asking permission, they could end up, that could be quite widespread, they could end up trying to argue fair use on that. So it's comparable to how fair use cases are evaluated. There's no specific word count that allows you to claim fair use. Each and every instance of quoting or using someone else's work must be assessed on a case-by-case basis. That's similar to what they're saying. So human authors are entitled to copyright in their works of authorship that are perceptible in AI-generated outputs. So if you have a book and you can perceive the bits that you did, even if it's surrounded by stuff that AI has generated, you are able to copyright those bits, as well as the creative selection, coordination, or arrangement of material in the output. So another example, and Robin, our friend who puts together stuff for non-fiction books, was talking about this probably in the pub. But he was saying that you could have a whole series of AI-generated images, but if you decide how they're going to be ordered and perhaps add captions for them to tell a story, you can claim copyright over that. You can't claim copyright over the individual images, but you can claim copyright over the way they're assembled.
So somebody could take those images and do something else with them.
Yes,
but
individually.
They couldn't reproduce. So in terms of writing, if you had a paragraph that was yours and then a paragraph that was AI, or a chapter that was yours and then a chapter that was AI, you could copyright the book itself, so somebody couldn't then reproduce the book. You could also copyright your chapter that you wrote as a human, but you couldn't copyright the chapter that the AI wrote.
So to take this to another degree, you could entirely generate a book, in AI, entirely generate every word in AI, you would move things around and put them in a particular order. Even if you didn't do that, I think because the chances of an AI producing those in the same order again are infinitesimally small. But you could copyright that book, even though somebody could take the individual chapters and reproduce them. You wouldn't be able to do anything about that. You couldn't copyright those words. But if they put them in the same order as you and produce that, that would be a breach of your copyright, even though I think this might be the case. This will be certainly one of the test cases, even though the entire book was generated by AI.
Yeah, and I mean, who would take just a chapter? But I think I think it says this in the article, where it gets really complicated is that at the moment there is no tool that can tell you with 100% certainty what is written by AI and what is written by a human. So if you're using it in a very integrative way, like people like Elizabeth Ann West do, you're not keeping track of which word is written by the AI and where you've put it and which sentence is written by them and what you changed in that sentence. It's going to be really, really difficult to pinpoint which bits are from AI or to prove it. How on earth would you prove it?
Well, you wouldn't, because you couldn't get an AI to generate those same words in that order again, very unlikely. And in some cases, the author might be dead, for copyrighted works. And how are you going to know? So that's going to be a very difficult area. People can challenge it. So in the photography world, I think the stock libraries are challenging Midjourney and people like that, saying that the composition and look of the photographs is very, very similar to actual photographs that they hold in their library of real people. And therefore that says they've used those pictures to learn from, which is their argument. But in our case, much, much harder to read a paragraph and think, oh, that feels AI generated. That's not going to be enough.
No. And I mean, copyright over, books and things like that is already extremely difficult if they go to court for people to prove. I mean, we don't even register copyright here in the UK, do we? No. It just, not officially. Once you publish your book, your copyright is therefore kind of in place. But
the author of a work has copyright by default in the UK, unless you sign a contract. Otherwise, like a ghostwriting contract, you would sign away. And when I worked for the BBC, anything I filmed or did during my time in employment was automatically the BBC's. That's because I've signed it away. And if I take a picture on my phone tomorrow, I own copyright of that without having to register it anywhere, unless someone can prove that I signed something giving them copyright. So the Authors Guild in the US has released their own statement alongside this, saying that the Copyright Office's guidance aligns with their position on AI. And they make the following points. Using AI to research or to generate outlines, that's what I've done, or brainstorm does not have to be disclosed or disclaimed. Interesting for us because you do get asked at the beginning of the upload process on KDP, have you used AI in the process of creating this book? According to the Authors Guild, if you've used it for plotting, and I think Amazon do make this clear in their notes, or at least
I think they do. I think it's mainly images that they're interested in.
Yeah. So using AI for such purposes does not affect one's copyright. Moreover, asking the AI to change your own work would not affect the underlying copyright. They write, if you wrote a story, then put it into a chatbot and asked it to change 2 of the characters, you would still own the copyright in the original story and could prevent anyone from using all of the elements that carried over in the AI revised story. But any expression added by the AI would not be copyrightable. How is that determined? Of course, is the question we've just talked about. And I think this is in parentheses, and I think that's what Jane's added here. It's unclear unless authors are scrupulously tracking every word and scrupulously honest about it. So AI-generated work in otherwise human work does not affect copyright in the work as a whole. Or if a work is a compilation of AI-generated text, the work is eligible for copyright as a compilation, but the AI-generated text is not protected. So that's what we talked about earlier. So basically, existing law offers precedents for dealing with copyright cases where some portions of the work are not protectable. And that's why they're saying they don't need new legislation here, because this is not similar to existing cases that have gone through. So I think that's very interesting. Have I got to the end of it? No, there's a bit more here. The Authors Guild admits establishing as a factual matter whether, so here's the Authors Guild addressing what we've just talked about of, can you prove that some of that's AI and some of that's human, or which part of it is? So establishing as a factual matter whether any particular element of a work is AI generated may present obstacles in infringement cases, making discovery even more laborious than it already is. So discovery is a process at the beginning of a court case where you offer up all your evidence. For instance, an author may not remember which sentences, paragraphs, or elements were AI generated, or they may have died and not kept records. For now, there is no good human or mechanical way to distinguish human authored from AI generated text on a word by word, sentence by sentence basis. AI generated stories give themselves away by their style, their odd narratives, and sometimes their nonsense, but it's not so obvious if a sentence here or there is AI generated. And that's going to be relevant to us because I very strongly imagine by the end of I've got to the end of this book, there'll be sentences in there that have been generated entirely by AI. I'm happy to say that because I will go, even if it's just for my own amusement, I'm going to try some scene writing alongside AI, and I'll probably end up using the odd sentence here and there. I mean, I think the bigger problem is my readers, because our readers won't have the level of discussion and understanding that you and I have. And this is why more successful authors than me who rely on this money for their income and their livelihoods are very wary about talking out loud about their use of AI, because their readers get a whiff of that. A reader might treat that as a zero-sum game and think, oh, so this book's been generated by AI. I don't want to read that.
Yeah. And I mean, did you see that the Authors Guild have released a thing where you can register for a certificate now? You can register for a badge that your book is human authored. So you have to be a member.
And presumably, judging by the way they approach it, that would include the odd sentence here and there from AI.
I guess so. But again, it's not really very clear. I'm on their website at the moment and it's self-certified. So like anybody could go on there and become a member of the Authors Guild and then register their book as human authored. So it's relying on the authors themselves on being completely transparent. It says here, human authored means that the text of the book was written by a human and not generated by AI, with the exception of minimal, trivial uses, such as AI applications that check spelling and grammar or for brainstorming or research. So they're implying that you couldn't have even used it for generative. A sentence or a few words. But
how would anyone know?
Exactly. And it feels a little bit like everything is moving faster already than what this is acknowledging, because AI is already being integrated into everything that we're using now. It's coming up everywhere. Would you like to generate an AI version of this? Would you like to generate an AI version of this text? In pretty much every application that I use, there is a, do you want to do this with AI button now? So it almost just feels a little bit like we're too late to have this discussion. It's already out there. There's already authors using this widely.
Well, there was a quote at the end of this report. There's a quote that you pointed out at the end of this report, isn't there? You've got it in front of you.
No, I haven't. You sent it to me on WhatsApp.
Let me read it to you. So it says, this is while attending a global AI summit in Paris, Kevin Roos of the New York Times wrote, at times this week, listening to policymakers discuss how to govern AI systems that are already several years old, using regulations that are likely to be outdated soon after they've been written. I'm struck by how different these timescales are. It feels at times like watching policymakers on horseback struggling to install seatbelts on a passing Lamborghini.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, well done, Kevin Roos. So that, I think that's of interest. I wonder where we are now with the anti-AI people, the people, that guy a couple of years ago at Vegas who said,
God, yeah, he said if anybody who works with AI is doing a deal with the devil, he put up a big red PowerPoint slide. And I walked out because I just found it such an unhelpful approach. And it just feels to me a little bit like, I think we've had this discussion before in relation to Photoshop. And when people were saying that people who use Photoshop weren't real artists, you can't call yourself an artist if you use Photoshop. It sort of feels to me like in 10 years time, maybe even sooner than that, using AI as part of your creative process, the way that we've been talking about, and also to write scenes, to help you write, it's just going to be a different way of being creative. And as far as I'm concerned, I just feel like I've written 47 novels. So if I want to use AI and work with it to improve my writing, to enjoy it, to tell more stories, better stories, that's part of the creative process now. And it's a tool that we've got. But I think the misunderstanding is when people think that you're talking about just plonking a book down that is purely AI written because you've just said, write me a story about an MI5 agent who does X, Y, Z, and it's churned it out for you 100,000 words and then you've published it. Yeah. And it's so much more nuanced than that. And I feel like even by the end of the year, there'll be the whole framework surrounding it will be completely different and the conversations that we're having.
Yeah.
It almost feels like mentioning I used AI will be a little bit like having to tell people you used a spell checker.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think that's going to be the case. And I do think, we're still, Judge, as you mentioned it earlier, looking at when you do ask AI to do some writing for you, we're so far away from being as good as even a mediocre writer like me. And Ben Affleck said the same thing about actors. There's what actors bring compared to what AI brings is not comparable at the moment. And by the looks of it, is light years away. So however quickly AI is moving in some areas, so being able to do your day trading for you or write your Python code and write your legal documents and stuff like that, it's moving incredibly fast and changing the landscape. It's probably got to where it's going to get in terms of its usefulness for writing now, in that if you work really closely with it, it will help you write a better book. But if you stand back a little bit and expect it to do the work, you're going to get a crap book.
Yeah, you've got to put the work in. And I think also we've got to remember that most of us who are doing this, some people, yes, they'll just use AI because they've seen, cool, I can use AI to help me release a ton of books. And those are no different from the people who already make money selling, blank journals on Amazon or there are already people out there producing quite bad, low content books without AI. But those of us who started this because we love storytelling, we still want to write. Like, I still want to write. I don't want Claude to write my book for me because I'm a writer. That's what I do. But I do get really excited that it can make me a better writer. I do get really excited by that brainstorming process and coming up with story ideas. And I find that it supercharges my creativity because it's giving me different ideas that I hadn't thought of. And then it makes my brain go, what about this? And sometimes it will give you, I've asked it before to write paragraphs for things to see what it comes up with. And it might all be utter rubbish, but there might be one phrasing in there that's really nice. And you think, actually, that's a really nice way to phrase something. And, use that, twist it a little bit. And that's no different than, when I'm reading for research, I'll write down sentences that are really nice sentences so that I can use those to kind of not copy them, but play around with them. Like and Sacha Black talks about this a lot when she does her prose talks, like analyzing what made that sentence really good. What adjectives did they use? How could I do something similar? Was it the juxtaposition between the two extremes of like something harsh and something soft? And what other words could I use? And that's the thing that gets me really excited. And that's being made better by AI for me. Yeah. But it depends on how you use it.
Yeah. I love using it. I think it's probably my personality type of wanting to do the next shiny object. That's definitely me. And so I think that it's reinvigorating writing.
Yeah. Definitely. Being able to produce more and do it quicker is also, we've all got loads of story ideas in our head. The idea of being able to actually tell them all before I die is like quite exciting.
Yes. When are you going to die? It's not soon. Although you're probably going to be a vampire, aren't you?
Well, hopefully. Here's hoping.
No spoilers about what happens to...
No, are you going to read book 2 then?
Kind of hooks now, aren't I? So I guess I am.
I converted James to Spice, everyone.
It'll have to wait till my summer holiday though, because I might write it.
Okay, it'll be released. It'll be ready by then. Yeah, thank you. Book Vault. Shout out to Book Vault. They're really. If you saw it on YouTube, it's got hot pink edges and foiled front.
And rude pictures. Should we show the rude pictures?
Yeah, go on then. Look away now if you don't want to see the rude cartoons. You have to freeze the frame
to see how rude that is. Okay, thank you.
If you come on the retreat, there will be copies of Luna lying around. As we're in Cambridge, you might as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good. Okay, don't forget, if you want to come to the Writers Retreat, you do need to be on the wait list. It's most likely the tickets are going to go to the folks on there. And there's only 20, and I think it's at least 35 on the wait list at the moment. Not everyone's going to definitely buy, so there's still opportunity for you, most likely. If you head to indiewritersclub.com/retreat, and then that link will switch over. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to do it that way because that means you don't need to be on the wait list. And whereas it doesn't prioritize us, no, we will email a special link out. It will be the ticket buying link.
I love it when we make decisions like on the spot while we're recording.
Just as I said that, doesn't make any sense. But you have to join, we obviously want to prioritize. At some point when everyone on the wait list has an opportunity to buy, if there's any tickets left, then I'll switch over that link to anyone. Okay, that is it. Thank you very much indeed, Cara.
Yeah, good to have you back.
Good to be back. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Sign up for episode alerts at indiewritersclub.com. Come and chat with us at our exclusive Discord server at indiewritersclub.com/Discord. Or join our Facebook group at indiewritersclub.com/Facebook. And you can support the podcast at indiewritersclub.com/support. And don't forget to share your weekly word counts, because no matter what you've achieved this week, we're here to cheer you on. Thank you for being part of the Indie Writers Club.
The Indie Writers Club was brought to you by Publish Drive. With one click, self-publish your ebooks, audiobooks and print books to thousands of stores and libraries worldwide. And now you can start for free forever. Publish Drive's new free plan lets you publish your first ebook absolutely free. No subscription fees, no commissions, keep 100% of the royalties. Get your titles online in just a few minutes at publishdrive.com.